For most of history, justice wasn't about fairness, it was about fear, and here are the most brutal punishments humans ever invented. Let's start in ancient Sicily, with a machine so cruel it became a legend. The Brazen Bull. It was a giant, hollow, bronze bull. The condemned were placed inside, and a fire was lit beneath it. The story says the inventor built it for a tyrant, and was then made the very first victim of his own creation. Next, ancient Rome, where execution was turned into entertainment. Damnatio ad bestias, condemned to the beasts. Criminals were thrown into an arena, unarmed, in front of roaring crowds, to face wild animals from across the empire. Tens of thousands watched it like a sport. To the average Roman, this was just a normal day at the games. Rome also perfected crucifixion, a slow, public death used for rebels, with bodies left on roads as a warning to all. Now go east. Ancient Persia is said to have used Scaphism, an execution designed to be as slow and prolonged as possible. Honestly, we're not sure how much is true or exaggerated by Persia's enemies. A lot of these were as much myth as reality. In the ancient Middle East, the Assyrians were infamous for flaying, removing a victim's skin, often displayed publicly. They carved it into their monuments to terrify enemies. The message was simple: this is what happens if you resist us. Move to medieval Europe, where public death was part of daily life. One of the most feared was the breaking wheel, a huge wooden wheel where the condemned were displayed in town squares, sometimes for days, as a warning to everyone. It was so infamous it appeared in art and in nightmares across the continent. They even called it the Catherine wheel. Then there was burning at the stake, used for heretics and accused witches, especially during the witch trials. It was meant to be both a punishment and a spectacle, often drawing entire towns to watch in the public square. In England, treason brought one of the harshest sentences in law, being hanged, drawn, and quartered. It was reserved for betraying the king, and it was deliberately theatrical, meant to erase your honor and your name. They displayed body parts at city gates, like London Bridge, where the heads of traitors greeted everyone walking in. The Tudors even had a brief law that punished poisoners by boiling them alive in public. It was as grim as it sounds. Eastern Europe gave us the punishment tied to one infamous ruler: impalement, made legendary by Vlad the Impaler. He used it on such a massive scale against his enemies that it became the dark symbol of his entire reign. Out at sea, sailors feared keel hauling. A sailor was dragged underneath the ship, beneath the hull, from side to side. On a ship, far from any court, the captain was judge and law. Order was kept through pure public fear. In parts of South and Southeast Asia, rulers used execution by elephant. Trained animals carried out public sentences. The elephant was a symbol of royal power, so the punishment was also a display of the ruler's absolute control. And in imperial China, there was Ling Chi, often translated as death by 1,000 cuts, reserved for the worst crimes. It was designed to be the most severe sentence possible, a total disgrace, and it was finally banned in 1905. There were so many more. The rack that stretched the body, sawing, stoning, gibbeting, where bodies hung in iron cages. Across every continent and every century, humans kept inventing new ways to make death public and terrifying. Which brings me to the real question: why? Why did people invent such horrifying things in the first place? And the answer is uncomfortable. For most of history, there were no police, no prisons, no real way to catch a criminal. So rulers relied on the only thing they had: make the consequences so terrifying that fear did the policing for them. That's why it was always public. The crowd wasn't a side effect. The crowd was the entire point of it. Everyone who watched left thinking the exact same thing: whatever happens, never, ever let that be me. But here's the twist that surprised me most. None of this actually worked very well. Crime never went away. When you look at the history, brutality almost never reduces crime. People break laws out of desperation, not logic. The more we learned about human behavior, the clearer it got. Terror is a terrible substitute for real justice. So slowly, painfully slowly, the world changed. Thinkers began arguing the punishment should actually fit the crime. By the 1700s, reformers pushed a radical idea that even criminals have rights, and cruelty isn't justice. Public executions were phased out. The bull, the wheel, the beasts, all of it faded into the history books. And not because people suddenly got gentle, but because we learned that fear just builds more fear, not order. That shift, from punishment as a show to justice as a system, is one of the quiet revolutions of human history. And when I look back at all this now, I feel horror. But honestly, I think that horror is a kind of progress. Because the fact that this shocks us means we're no longer the society that once cheered for it. The people who watched weren't monsters. They were ordinary people, shaped by an incredibly brutal world. which leaves me with one uncomfortable thought. What do we accept today that future generations will be horrified by? Every era thinks its justice is fair. The Romans did, the medieval crowds did, and honestly, so do we. So these aren't just stories of cruelty, they're a mirror showing exactly how far we've come and how we got here. And maybe a quiet reminder of how far we still have to go. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and if you found this interesting, you know what to do. Like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.